Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. I hope you are enjoying the format so far and the last couple of guests we've had. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're staying safe and creative as always. And we've got another great episode lined up for you today. Another person that I've wanted to get on for a while, a bit back and forth the last couple of weeks with technical difficulties and trying to organise them. But we finally got there. We're sitting here now in front of you having a conversation. I'm interviewing today an amazing artist who I've admired for a couple of years and really wanted to talk to him more about his journey because it kind of emulates my own, funnily enough, which I think is very rare to find in this podcast where people have taken the same kind of path, because I talk about how when you ask people how they got in the industry, the answer is always different. People always have their own unique version of it, but he has a very similar path to mine. So today we're interviewing Mr. Gavin Manners. Hey Gavin.
Hello. Hey, how you doing? You right?
Yeah, I'm doing well, bud. Thanks for coming on and out your time. We finally got there.
Yeah.
After many weeks of trial and error, and
so I think this is fourth time lucky, isn't it?
Something like that. And then even when we started up today, for whatever reason, my mic wasn't wanting to work, and then something came up, and oh god, just it's always something. So, 8 years of doing this, there's never. I can't go a couple of episodes without there being some technical hitch, but yeah, finally got there. So we've kind of back and forth for a while about you coming on and talking about what you've done. For people who don't know you at the moment, what are you doing currently?
I'm kind of a hard surface designer, and I do a bit of environments as well. I'm currently art directing a project over at a company called Chain Chemists, who are like a little subsidiary of Counterplay Games, who are a little bit more well known. So I'm technically working for a startup, but it's good fun. I basically just draw mechs all day, which is kind of what I like to do. So
nice. But then again, you've done a lot of stuff along the way, because you've worked at a bunch of game studios and you've worked at places like Atom Hawk, back in the day, and done a couple other projects, stuff that you're more famous for. But it's interesting as well because we'll kind of get into that. But you're almost famous for not just your professional work, but there's a lot of personal stuff you've done recently with your jump racers and stuff like that. That's been really like your Kickstarter went live, like was that a month ago or something? Or
and it was actually February. It was way back in February. We're in June already.
Yeah, wow. But then that was successful, right? It did get backed, and it did kind of all happen. And yeah. So brilliant. So that's what I'm saying, because like how often do people launch that kind of stuff and it just goes into the ether, like nobody backs it? So extremely well received. So
it was quite interesting though. I suppose when you put something on Kickstarter, you always hope that it's going to do like the pick up a lot of momentum, where it does get, you ask for £5,000 and then you get £100,000. You see those, but for every one of those, there's 1,000 that just about meet their budget.
I think it's
target.
It's like even like Etsy at the moment. Like you think being an artist and going in there and selling some stickers, you might get some like you might make $1,000 or $2,000, or some people I think I've only ever sold one sticker made like $3. Like it's there's so much competition in the realm of like artistry online, which I think people thought would get stunted by AI, but also it's kind of been the opposite, because I see so many people now who are backing human artists and being like, no, fuck AI, like please go help the human people, go to their Etsy shop, go to their website, buy a print, buy something, it's weird how it's both brought the community together and also helped normal people realize how valuable actual artists are.
I was going to say, it's been quite nice to see, quote unquote normal people being able to differentiate between human-made art and then AI art, and then also appreciating what makes human-made art special. And it's because I was imagining a future where people will just consume pretty looking pictures, not be aware of where it comes from and kind of how unethical it is, and then just will go that way, and then human-made artists won't be able to produce. I can't produce an image in 3 seconds, so you just get drowned out. But I think it's gone a completely different direction, which I think it's been really nice to see.
Yes, which I'm glad is now. What I've done basically to quench my fears was I went to speak to some data scientists I knew and be like, what is the prognosis like? How do you see? And every single one of them was like, I really don't understand why artists are being scared. Like, we've essentially made a Photoshop filter for AI, and it isn't going to be anything close to what you guys do in the industry. Like, it's never going to be that intelligent. Like, maybe in like 100 years, maybe. But then we're talking about an artificial intelligence that thinks like a person. He's like, I've been researching that most of my life, and like even I know that's decades off, if not more, because like it's such a complex task. Like basically building a consciousness in a computer. Like, you know, people think it's around the corner. He's like, I fucking wish it was, you know, like, no, like it's way, way, way off. So like, yeah, the whole thing of problem solving. And then obviously Feng, you know, had the whole thing of like the episode he done
I
where,
was just going to bring that up. Yeah,
yeah, like,
that was a really nice way of categorizing
yeah,
the two kind of ways of thinking about it.
yep, which is good because it's interesting though, because the thing I didn't like is that I think senior artists for so long had been like, "Oh, it's fine," you know. They knew they weren't worried for whatever reason, and then I knew the reason why they weren't worried. But it was like, well, yeah, like if you had just came out and said like why, not just that like don't worry, but like well don't worry because. Whereas then Feng came out and he's like, this is exactly why I'm not worried because this is, you know, and like we just needed that level. We just need that level of people to come out and
I think I formulated my thoughts about AI kind of around Concept 101 last year,
right.
because you start getting asked a lot of questions. You know, somebody in the industry, you get asked a lot of questions by students and people who want to get into the industry, and I just you have to sit with it a bit, because again, you're not quite sure what it is. When I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is either really really cool and it's going to help the workflow, or it's going to be absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to just I had to have a think about what I thought,
Hmm.
to formulate a response. And I came down on the side of, I thought there would be, it's kind of what's happening now. You'd have this AI created stuff, and it's just going to be consumed by, you know, again, apologies if you like Marvel, but the more recent Marvel films, it's just content to be consumed.
Oh yeah, we
There's
know
not really
this.
any substance, you know,
Yeah.
not like the you know the old Marvel. I think I kind of just saw AI as that, just
Mhm.
content to be consumed. Don't think about it. Consume next content,
Yeah.
um, and then you'd have this kind of movement of, you know, artisan, um, human made, handcrafted artwork, where people would go out seeking
Yeah.
human made artwork because of, you know, it forced me to try and articulate what it is about doing artwork that I think is so special,
Mhm.
and why is it not valuable to have an image that has had nobody put any work into it? Why
Mhm.
is that not valuable? It's the same way. You know, the reason why people go to the gym, for example, because if everybody could have a Henry Cavill physique without even trying, then that wouldn't have any value. And
Yeah.
I think people intrinsically know that something that's difficult to do takes time, takes thousands and thousands of hours to learn how to do, and dedication. That inherently gives it value. And I thought artists would get to the point where they, you know, they kind of knew and understood that, like myself. But
Mhm.
it's been really nice to see that that kind of normal people can even on a subconscious level,
Tell.
you can tell. Yeah, you have a there's a gut feeling like, oh,
Uncanny
this doesn't
Valley
really
kind of thing.
have
Yeah.
any soul to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but sorry, a big tangent, but the point I'm trying to make is it took me a bit of time to formulate what my response and what I thought about it, because it was such a bizarre new thing. Like, you
Yeah.
know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that I couldn't even have conceived of AI,
Yeah.
image creation, generative image creation, and now it's here. It's
For
like, oh,
sure.
okay. So I guess it takes. I imagine we'll get more people like Feng coming out and giving their thoughts. I think it's just such a new thing. It's just going to take a bit of time for people to
To think about it.
think
Yeah.
about it and formulate
Opinion.
a
Yeah.
measured response.
Yeah, because even you mentioned Concept 101, you know, Daniel's been really vocal about, you know, his
Mm,
studio using it to an extent, and then why he was upset at that, and then obviously the things he's been posting about human made artists and the ethics behind it, and Carla and Stephen and all those
yeah,
people have been doing incredible stuff over there and fighting for their rights, and you know, but it's, you know, people are going to get sick of this because I've said this so many times in this podcast, but it's always the different people. But the whole thing of like what happened was you see the trend of the people who backed the NFTs, and then that crashed, and then, you
yeah,
know, moved to crypto, that crashed, and then everybody moved to AI. So
yeah.
it's the latest snake oil scam. And even now, I was watching the other day, like I follow Linus Tech Tips, and he done a video on like how much of a scam it is and how it's just basically snake oil. Like it's just another thing they try to feed you to get money out of you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, if at that point he's talking about it like that, like it's dead, like it's just going nowhere. Even the whole thing of people now looking into Chat GPT and how they are faking their presentations and making
Yes.
them, it's like, just like the curtain has been pulled back. Like everybody now sees like, no, like you're doing it wrong. But the funny thing is, even with like Star Wars and Marvel and Disney in general, you see the backlash they're now getting because of the mass produced stuff. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like somebody was talking about the Marvel films and also the Star Wars stuff, but they're like, when you mass produce stuff like that, it becomes less special. The reason Force Awakens, everybody was like losing their shit over that trailer, was because there hadn't been a Star Wars film in like 20 years.
Mm.
Like it was a big thing. They were like,
Yeah.
shit. Like even I was watching Nintendo Direct today, and they finally announced the new Metroid 4, and or Metroid Prime 4, and it was like, I've seen people also losing their shit over that because of the fact that, like, I think it's been something like, I can't even think, it's 8 years since a Metroid game was announced or even came out. And the same with the Zelda stuff that got announced, like there's not been a really proper new Zelda for a while. And so, like, yeah, it's one of these things that, like, when you make things mass produced, it just loses the inherent specialness that makes it cool. And I think it's the same with a lot of games that came out recently where people are just backing sequels or things that are just kind of keep coming out and coming out. Want to try and keep things as unique as possible, because like a game we were talking recently about this, and shout out to the guys down south who done Hellblade, the Hellblade games. I'd say Team Ninja, but it's not Team Ninja. That's in Japan. It's Ninja Theory. I
Ninja
think.
Theory.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, the new Hellblade game, I think Hellblade 2 has been not as greatly received. And the reason I think is because it was a sequel, and I've seen people break down why they didn't like it as much. But what they liked about the first Hellblade game was that the game came to a nice crescendo in the end of that game and kind of tied up Sona's like experience and what she was doing, and then that was like, it's done. That's the story
Yep.
over. It's been told. Move on. But because they had to then continue it and drag her back out in another sequel, people were kind of like, oh shit, like, I didn't really feel as good as I did about the first one. But it's difficult because, like you said, during an era where we work in this industry and we know that people aren't taking risks on new IPs or
Brand
new
recognition
games.
is very important,
Yes.
especially considering how much this stuff costs to make.
And how long it takes to make, 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
sometimes in the AAA space. And there's people whose jobs it is at game companies is to predict these trends so that in 4 or 5 years, when the game comes out, it's still relevant. And that's why we see so many games getting announced just now that are like basically Sekiro clones, because that was a whole thing back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Stuff like Tsushima, and there's a whole bunch of that flying off, into the E3 stuff. And yeah, that's what people were saying was the problem with a lot of AAA spaces, is that it takes so long to make something that by the time it comes out, like the whole trend, the market might have moved a whole other direction. And because obviously, like even when Fortnite came out, there was a million things that tried to do battle royale games, and some of them have been successful and stayed around, but it's trying to judge that. But when you take a risk on an original IP and you try to do something different, it's usually when that pays off, because then it's when the market moves and everybody's doing the same thing. If you're doing something different, then you're kind of like king of the nerds, because you have an original idea, an original thought. So yeah, but it's the same with artists, right? Because I was talking about this as well with some guys, how like ArtStation for so long had just almost kind of poisoned people to like what you should be making as an artist.
Yeah.
Should be making. And Feng talked about it in his video about little person, big building.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Trend for years, and I think that's why I liked your stuff, because you weren't doing the same as everybody else, right?
That's not intentional though. Like
No.
I've always looked at ArtStation and gone, oh, I'd love to be able to do that. And I have kind of always oriented myself towards artists that I admire, and it's always been a case of, oh, I'd love to be able to do that. But I kind of, when I'm doing my own stuff, I don't, more often than not, I don't go, obviously I reference other artworks and stuff when I'm doing my own. Just you want to see, how have they done that, or how does this work, kind of thing. But yeah, I find myself just doing what I find interesting.
Yeah.
So I didn't set out to become a hard surface designer. I just am really interested in machines and mechanical stuff and mechs. And it's just, I kind of feel like I've just been quite lucky with my career, because I've not intended any of this to happen. It's just I've just fallen into all of this stuff because I've just gone towards what I found interesting, and then an opportunity pops up, and then I'm like, oh, that's quite a good opportunity, and then
Mhm.
you go for it. But I get a lot of students or people trying to break into the industry messaging me, asking for portfolio reviews and things like that, which,
Right.
yeah, I always try to do, because
Mhm.
that's what I got when I
Yeah.
um,
Pay
got into the
forward.
industry. So yeah, well, exactly, it's just, but the common thing tends to be they're trying to do, and again, this is a bit of a cliche. I know this isn't it. I'm not saying anything new or
No, no.
interesting, but it seems to be they're trying to do absolutely everything
Right.
to show a studio that they can do everything. But the trap you fall into there is you don't become really good at any one thing. And I think my experience anyway, the advice I always give is I got my first job by just focusing on one thing, and I
Mhm.
just got very very lucky that my first job was designing cars for like a sort of a near future racing game,
Oh, okay.
which was really really cool. But
Yeah.
and again, like the stuff that I did back then, I look at it now and I think, yeah, that's I could definitely do much better.
Yeah.
But it got my foot in the door, and I was chatting to my buddy Matt
Mhm.
yesterday, I think. So he was lead character artist at Creative Assembly, but he went back over to America. I can't remember where he works now,
Mhm.
but he's a very cool guy. Been in the industry a long time,
Mhm.
um, and we were just saying, yeah, it's that first initial studio or getting that first job, and then once you've got that, then it just kind of snowballs.
Almost
It
there.
becomes
Yeah.
becomes a lot easier to. I don't know necessarily if that's true now because of the layoffs that we've been having over the last year, but it certainly was the case about 6 years ago when I was getting into the industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So a couple of points. So one where I don't know if you've seen Feng's latest video, like has just
Starting a studio,
yes.
yeah, I haven't watched it yet. No,
Yeah. So what he talks about there is the fact that a couple of things are going to happen. The boom is going to happen again post 25 because studios will get to a point where they'll look on their boards and be like, shit, we've not got any games
yeah,
scheduled for whatever, so we need to get people back in the
yeah.
studio.
We fired everybody. We can't make any games anymore.
Dang, I really shouldn't have thought about that. Yeah, like fuck's sake. But also, like he thinks that in a sense there might be again he's no he doesn't have anything inside. He acknowledges like, look, I'm not doing any work for any particular company, but we're getting to the age where there might be a new console cycle coming up, like new
Mm,
PlayStations, new Xbox, new Switch, new whatever. So
I hope not.
again,
I've just bought a PS5.
oh no, fuck.
That's nothing.
Yeah. But like he's thinking that like in the next couple of years at least,
Mm,
there's going to be some sway to like start making content for that stuff. So he's like, yeah, I think he thinks the boom of needing artists is going to be, post this year. There's going to be a big need for people to come back in the studio, and I see it daily. I see people like only just this morning who are posting like, "I'm done with the industry. Fuck it. I've been applying for jobs for 9 months. I'm getting nothing back."
yeah.
And really, I know people who are in the inner sides, and because I'm lucky, like I'm in a very privileged position to know, like we've talked about this, high level people who
Mm,
are art directors, who are studio directors, who have worked in the industry for many years, and the conversations I'm having with them, because sometimes students and people might only have access to maybe people who are their peers or lower down and won't know what's going on in the inner workings at the top, but a lot of the high level guys I'm talking to are like, yeah, we're really just prepping for the next run of hiring people. Like we're not hiring this year, sure, because like the layoffs have basically bled into this year, and we're
mm,
still kind of in that financial time of trying to work out what we're going to do budget wise. But next year and leading into next year, yeah, that's when we're going to start looking at it, like how many people can we hire and what money do we have to get people back in the studio. Because everybody suffered from the layoffs, but I do feel like there's going to be a bounce back into people wanting to get hired for games. So, and I know people that are getting hired also recently. So like it's not a thing where I think like, it's impossible to find work. I think it's just this job has never been secure. It's never been a guaranteed lifestyle. It's never been a thing where you're always going to have work, until you're, 60 odd and you can
mm.
retire easily. Like you kind of have to hustle as much as you can and just keep moving through one stepping stone to the next until you land somewhere half decent. I mean, the dream is always a big studio, but like that's a rarity now, I think, for a lot of people. It's if you get those big studio jobs, it's kind of like winning the lottery in our
Yep.
industry, like because a lot of us will always be freelance and do work for hire. So if you ever get an offered a studio gig, it's a big deal. So
One thing I will say
mhm,
is, Oh, you mentioned personal work briefly earlier, because I don't really post much of my client work, or work that I do for studios, because
Because you can't.
you can't exactly.
Yeah.
And I do so much personal work because I really enjoy doing it, but it is the personal work that gets me jobs.
Yep.
Um,
Bigger opportunities as well, because I think when studios see
yeah.
that you're that dedicated outside of what you're normally doing,
Mm.
they're like, Jesus, I wonder what it's going to be like when he sits down in my brief. Like, you know, when he's getting money to do it, like, what's it going to do then? So,
But again, that is something that I've just fallen into. I think another thing that I try to get across is you have to really love making art, I think, to do this job. The reason I do so much personal work, I mean, I'm sure there's some childhood psychology behind it, but the reason I do so much artwork is because it's so intrinsically linked to my sense of like
being
being. It's like my anchor. You know,
right, yeah,
I am an artist. I love producing artwork. It's the most fulfilling thing. Like that model kit that I did, that's probably the most satisfying thing I've ever done. It's
right,
like I did a drawing, and then I did a 3D model,
hmm
and then my friend Joel helped me make it 3D printable,
hmm
and then I've got my it's come out of my brain, and
yeah,
it's in my hand, and I'm building it, and I've painted it,
yeah,
and it's incredible.
yeah,
But there's that feeling is what drives me forwards,
yeah,
of constantly producing work and constantly chasing that feeling.
good.
If you
3D
don't
print,
if you don't have that and it's just a job for you, I don't think. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there are some geniuses that don't do personal work and still manage to. Um,
yeah. There's people I think so. I think to piggyback off what you're saying, I have seen people like that who literally will go to their job, do their job, come
yeah,
home, switch off,
yeah,
and you can do that in this industry, but you might not get the kind of I'm not going to say rockstar lifestyle because it's not rockstar lifestyle, but it's like the thing of like if you want to go to the bigger and badder companies, if you want to travel internationally, make bigger impacts in the projects you do,
mm,
you need that personal side of work because then it shows that how much of the dedication you have to not just your craft, but also idea generation. So bigger companies will see that and be like, well, we need to grab that guy, we need to grab that guy. And it's mostly in senior positions, but like you know, the people I know who have got to do the big, huge AAA games, they were always, you know, making books or making models on the side or
yeah.
yeah, like
I suppose and I'll add a thought to that,
mhm.
because I don't want to be disparaging to anybody who doesn't do personal work.
No, no.
But I've only been in the industry for 6 years, and which is why I still have that like passion and
The
that
light
kind of
hasn't
like
burned out of your eyes.
yeah, because I really remember this actually. It was uh yeah, the guys that do the art cast, the art department podcast, Jan
Yeah, so
Urschel and
Jan and
Emmanuel
Emmanuel, yeah.
Yeah, and Emmanuel was talking about how he just got so burnt out with work and he didn't want to do it and he lost the love for the work. And I always think back to that because I always worry, when am I going to get to that point where I just don't want to do artwork anymore? And because I've only been in the industry for 6 years, and I've only been like I actually only think I've got to a point where I can get stuff out of my head maybe the last 2 years. And everything before that, it's like, why doesn't it look like the way I want it to look?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but when you've been working for 20 years, I imagine you'd get to that point where you're sick of it. You don't want to get home and do artwork. You got kids and stuff. You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's just that stage of my life. But
You've got a
also,
bit of free time, yeah.
yeah, I'm slightly delayed because I'm 38 and I don't have children. Yeah.
Same, bro.
Normally people would have got that out of the way by this
Yeah.
point, but
But then, like, everybody's I've learned this, so this is me talking just as a place where we sit in the kinda same saddle, is that I've learned that, like, you're always where you're meant to be, every
mm,
time. People always have this thing about looking forward or looking back or looking at other people, and you are meant to be here now, you know, like
with you.
yeah, with me. Oh, like, yeah, but I mean, when I look back, Gavin, you know, and I think about I used to fix phones for a living, you know,
Wow, yeah.
and when people told me that, like, I was gonna die in that job, I was guaranteed, like, I was like, "I wanna leave. I'm never gonna" no. I'd never get into university. That was a big thing. I'd never get accepted for university. I'd never graduate. I'd never even get my name in a game's credit screen. That was the things they were telling me. And I have done all three of those, and so...
Who was telling you that? You don't need those people in your life.
The guys I worked with, yeah. The guys that used to were in the job, they were like, you'll never do that. You'll never... I remember specifically Gavin, right? It was literally... I had signed up to do because I drew. So I was in metal bands for years, right? I used to do covers for some albums we done, right? And I took a Photoshop course to try and be a better painter, illustrator, whatever the fuck. And I was talking to one of the guys at my job about it because we're sitting in the van for hours at a time. You talk about random shit.
Yeah.
And the guy said to me, he says, what you got to do with that? I says, well, like I'll draw some more album covers. I was like, I don't know, I may get some more commissions. Says, who knows? I could go work on a game or something, or go work in it. He's like, no, you'll do nothing with that, Gordon. He says, you're a real engineer. You're going to die in this job. I was like, you can what? No.
I think I've been quite lucky in that sense because I've not had people telling me that I can't do something. I really remember this actually. My dad wasn't around when I was a kid, so everything kind of came from my mum. And there was two things that she said, and they really stuck with me. First thing she said was, I was going to go to college to do art and design, and I said to her, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to do it, and she said, nothing worth doing is easy, and that was at the age of 19. So that's kind of really stuck with me, and that even I still have that in my head when I go to the gym, for example, and it's not an easy session. Just like, no, it's got to be difficult, otherwise you're not going to have any of that sort of growth.
Exactly.
And I was going to make another point then, and I can't remember what it was. What were we talking about before that?
Oh, I remember that. But like people have this thing about like telling you no and you can't do things, but like...
Oh yeah. And no, that's the other thing I was going to say. She's always been really, really supportive of anything that I wanted to do.
Good.
But she said, like, so I used to do an electrical apprenticeship. So I left school and I was so sick of, because we come from a working class background. So I never had any money, couldn't buy any things that I wanted. When you're a kid, you're just like, why can't I have this? Well, we haven't got any money. So as soon as I left school, I was just like, how can you make money? Electricians make a lot of money. Oh, that's kind of cool, I guess. I went to do that. Absolutely hated it. I'm better than I was, but I was quite sensitive when I was younger, so I didn't really get on building sites and all that banter and all the lads sort of stuff.
Exactly. It's the whole reason I hated that job. I fucking hated it for that reason. Yeah.
I was actually quite good at it. Like, I lined all my cables up nice and neatly. I was really satisfying.
It was decent. I had a decent gig, but like it was just like people will say. I think of the people who were here who I worked with would be like, "Oh, it was fucking shit." But like, so a couple of things I've learned getting older is that I'm probably ADHD. Like I think like most artists on the planet. So like with that ADHD, you have a hypersensitivity to people and people talking about you because you have this fear of being perceived. Like you don't want people to really notice you, but also, you get sometimes hyper focused on a subject where you try to explain to people, but they look at you weirdly like, why the fuck do you know all that about like a game or a film or a TV show? And you're like, oh, but it's cool. And the thing that I used to go into, back in the day, I remember this was these memories that wrought about my brain, but I used to play the Legacy of Kain games like Soul Reaver and stuff, and like Kane's Legacy and whatever the fuck. And I was obsessed with that universe because it's like, so Amy Hennig wrote it. So the person who eventually went on to write the Uncharted series for Naughty Dog, but it's her first gig writing for Silicon Knights and the Uncharted. So I'm doing it right now. This is me talking about the hyperfixation of like, I love this subject matter, but I do that. I start talking in depth about something. People are like, fucking weird, Gordon. You're weird. You're like, but it's, Darren Yao done a whole post about it ages ago where he was like, I think he said like something like 70% of his studio are on the spectrum somewhere. And he was like totally surprised by that. And I'm like, that doesn't surprise me at all.
I think in order to be hyper focused on something, in order to get that good at it, I think you have to be neurodivergent in some way or another.
You do, yeah. The thing of like, even the fact that like it was always laughable, but like I would read the symptoms a bit like, oh yeah, procrastinates constantly, doesn't do things to the last minute, has time, like impulse control, like I was like, Jesus Christ, this is just a bible of like my entire life, but that then it's like the superpower that makes us different from the norms, where like we can sit for 6 hours and paint something, and not think twice about getting up to go to the bathroom, because you're so focused on what you're doing. You're like, I don't want to get up. And because you're also in flow, you don't want to stop that. But like, yeah, it's a whole thing of like, people will tell you that you're different or you're weird for being different. But then the people who are different on this planet are the people who are changing it. People who make art and music and books and film and like, you know, and it's the funny thing where people, the thing that annoyed me with AI was that people were talking to an artist and being like, oh, you've been fucking on your high horse for years. And I'm like,
Gatekeeping is the funny one,
gatekeeping,
isn't it? Yeah.
gatekeeping, fuck
Such a
me.
misuse of that word.
But like the fact that like, you know, when COVID hit and people couldn't go outside, what were they doing? We're watching TV shows, they were reading books, they were playing video games. So like we are the people who were then bringing all of that to them. Like you know, there's some games or movies or things you've worked on the last couple of years that wouldn't exist without your input. You know what I mean? When you think about it like that. So like
I'm very proud that I worked on Helldivers 2.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I remember seeing you post up about it. Yeah.
Because that's been received very, very well.
Fucking love that game, bro. It's so good. I was stunned silent when I can't remember what the studio was, but they just announced there's going to be a Starship Troopers game in October.
Oh yeah.
Because they got the guy who played Johnny Rico. I forget his name, Casper Van Dien. Yeah, so they got him to come and like promote it on IGN Live recently, and I was watching that, and he was loving that obviously because I don't think his career's been as stellar as it has since Starship Troopers.
Yeah,
but like that game is coming out at the end of this year, and I was like, it's basically a first person version of that. But who knows if it'll do as well. But like, I was really stunned when that came out. But Helldivers has been, apart from the recent controversy, but that's more to do with Sony. But like, that game's been really well received. But like, that's what I'm saying. Like, your influence on making that stuff. Think how many people's lives have been influenced because of that game. You know, like even the things on Reddit where people talking about like, so I think it was one. This is really sad, obviously, but one of the guy's best mates like died. With like I think he got to play it for like 6 months and then he basically passed away. But the whole community done like a salute thing on Twitter, like to him to like send them off and stuff. But like the communities and that stuff have been incredible. But like to think you've had that influence, and that's why I do what I do. That's when people ask me why I make art. That's why, because you get to influence people's lives in that way. Like the same reason I do the Artcast, because you know 2 years back when I got that email for that guy in Australia who was leaving his job to go as an engineer to go back to art school in Australia. I was like, I would never think in a million years me talking in a bedroom in Scotland would ever influence somebody on the other side of the world to go back to fucking school, man. Like that's
great,
wild. Like I was in tears reading it, but like it's interesting to see like how people can change their lives. And we've not talked about it at the start, but like you were an architect. Like qualified architect, was architect's assistant, or I know there's different levels.
I was an interior architect,
right?
So it's still architecture, but it's 3 years instead of 3 years in a placement instead of 7 years in a placement,
right? Which is intense because my partner's dad's a former architect, like in a high rank, and he was one of the heads of one of the departments in the local council. But like, yeah, it's an intense education system for that. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll start at the beginning there, and I'll just loop back around to my mum's second piece of advice, and then I'll stop talking about mum. She just said that I can do whatever I want as long as I'm in education or I'm paying my way.
Right.
And so I never had, from the age of like 14, I never had it in my head that I could just doss around doing nothing. That I'd always had to be supporting myself, and I don't know why, but that's just kind of stuck in. So so I changed from doing the electrical stuff to doing the art and design course because it was going back into education, and it was I knew I'd always been kind of creative. I'd always like drawing space marines and stuff like that, and like robots when I was at school. So I was like, I want to find something to do that's kind of creative, because I even back then I kind of felt that pull. And then that's how I discovered interior architecture. And then after that college course, I went to university to do interior architecture.
Right.
Still paying that loan off now, which is 15 years later. Even though I'm not an interior architect anymore.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what though, the interior architecture thing, there was a lot of crossover, because I got a job out of uni, which was actually
quite 3D as well, right?
Well, exactly. So I started off. I did some designing, which was kind of cool, but it's very restrictive and very stuffy, especially as a junior, because the kind of the hierarchy of these architecture practices is, especially somebody low down, you don't get a lot of say in like what stuff looks like, and it's cool. I learned a lot, but so my niche that I carved out was I started doing a lot of architectural visualization. Right. So they would give me drawings, and they would give me like sketches and say, can you make that look like a photo? So the majority of my work was especially for the last. So I did interior architecture for 8 years professionally,
Mhm.
and I spent at least 4 of those years being a full-time architectural visualizer because it was more fun for me because I was creating images and like playing with the lighting and the materials and all that kind of stuff, and like taking your shot in the scene,
Mhm.
and I just had a bit more kind of creative freedom, even though it was
Essentially,
somebody else's design.
yeah, essentially what we do in environment art, right? You're kind of
Well,
doing almost the same thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I got probably a similar sort of situation to you, but I got to the age of 30,
Right.
um, and I had a little mini freak out because even though like yeah, it was good money,
Mhm.
I was working in London, so that was kind of cool. Well, it's just like I wasn't doing what I've wanted to do because I've always loved video games, I've always loved Warhammer, I've always loved sci-fi, movies and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, how do I get in? Like, well, what is that? I didn't even know what a concept artist was, and I discovered Gnome Workshop DVDs, and then
Same.
Feng Zhu's website, and it was this really old school rudimentary website, and he showed his sketches and then the finished painting. I was like, how has he gone from that to that? I
Yeah.
didn't understand, and I actually started learning about concept art from Design Cinema,
Right.
because
It's
he's
crazy that there's like 145 episodes of that. That's like
yeah,
a
yeah.
free education for people. Like you don't even know at school. Just start at episode 1 and go through them
Yep.
all.
But
Yeah.
so this is what I tell people. So I actually started watching it episode 1,
Mhm.
and that was kind of like what lit a fire under me. But yeah, but people message and I
Mhm.
say, well, watch this one and watch this one because he's got drawing 101. He's got how to get into the industry, how to build a portfolio. It's all there. It's all free.
Yeah.
All you have to do is put the hours in. Um, it's obviously a bit more complicated than that, but
But
you
that's
know,
also, I think, what I feel. I've met some students who are the same, where like, they'll say, "How do you get better at drawing?" And like, there is no other answer than like,
mileage.
open your sketchbook, get your pen and your
Yeah.
pencil, and fucking draw boxes till you fall down. Like, yeah.
It really helps. The biggest jumps in ability I've made is where I've had like a mentor figure. And when I say a mentor, I don't mean a literal official mentor.
Mhm.
One of the people who had the biggest effect on my work is a guy called Dario Jelusic. He's a Croatian guy.
Okay.
He's an art director at Atom Hawk at the moment, but when I first joined, he was a principal concept
Nice.
artist, and he's like one of my best friends. Even though I don't live in Newcastle anymore, so
Mhm.
I don't see him very often. He's got a kid now as well,
Yeah.
but we used to hang out all the time, and he had such a no. He still has such a no nonsense attitude. It was just like, well, just do it,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I was kind of struggling to kind of get the motivation. I didn't know what to do. He's got this fantastic Croatian accent. I'm not going to try and do it because it's probably quite offensive. Um, he just goes, oh well, we'll do a project and then we'll do a brief and we'll do this and this and then I was like, okay. And so he structured it out for me, and that was the Napoleon Diesel Punk project that I did,
Right.
and that really forced me to sit down and learn to one formulate ideas
Mhm.
and create a bit of structure and to
Mhm.
just sit down and get those bad drawings out of the way. And it was just I really remember that point, and that was potentially that was 2021.
Right.
um, so since then I've kind of learned this art of just sitting down and getting things done. And
Croatian method.
yeah, it's getting that art block out of the way and that kind of self doubt. And now now I kind of have this belief, even though it's not always true, that if I just sit down and get
Mhm.
the crap drawings out of the way, something
Mhm.
good will come out. It's that exploration. Whereas before I was just afraid of sitting down because I was afraid of doing something that wasn't very good.
Yeah. I mean, dude, like I've learned, like, I don't know what it is sometimes about people in certain countries, but like the Eastern European people I've met who do art, fuck me, like just some of their portfolios are like, there was a guy,
He's honestly one of the best illustrators that I know of. He's so good.
yeah, one of the guys I met years ago, Janos, like at Access, like my god, like his sketchbook, and he wasn't even at a uni yet, but you would flick through his sketchbook and you were like, oh my god, there was people at Industry Workshop, I'm not shitting you, like Giles and stuff, who were looking at his stuff being like, how the fuck are you not working? And I was like, he is working. He's at Access right now,
Yeah.
and he's like not even at uni yet. But like, yeah, like there's some like mental thing of like, I mean, Maciej's talked about it in a sense, like, and growing up in Poland when he did, and and there's because there's not a lot of great opportunities in that side of the world sometimes, depending where you live, depending where you grow up. Obviously everyone's different, but like you learn a ride or die mentality. Like you have to do it because the option is, like Leo Everett has talked about it really quite recently in one of his videos openly, where he's like, I either got a job being successful in art, or I was going to work at like a mining facility to support like my whole family.
Yeah.
That was the two options. Like, so it was either I had to make it work, or I was going down a fucking mine. Like, so like when you're faced with that level of like get stuff done, then you have to, like, because what is the option? And like your environment will, like the biggest thing I feel has been my drawback, and I'm also being hard on myself because I'm doing fairly well in the industry, but like, because you're surrounded sometimes with a lot of privilege in the UK, depending where you grow up, depending on circumstances are, people get this idea of like, oh, things aren't that bad, like we're poor, but like people can afford mobile phones, they can afford stuff, but like we don't have that kind of like killer instinct I think a lot of people do to get like stuff done. I mean, again, depending on the person, everybody's different, but like, yeah, I do feel as the British people, I have met have been that thing where like it's almost like an overthinking bug. Like you think too much about stuff, you get too caught up in your head about doing stuff, rather than just the attitude of just like get it done. Like he says, just
Get
the
on
next
with
thing,
it.
get it done. Yeah,
Yeah.
get on with it. So, which has been, to your, pro the last couple of years, because I mean, you've just made so much stuff. I mean, even the fact that like it was, I was laughing because like technically your career was launched through Tinder, right?
Yeah, where did you hear that? That is true. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
no,
I might have mentioned that on another podcast.
I know Giles did. Oh, Eels, or, yeah, so Giles Kettling, Giles?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He sits opposite me in my
Yeah,
studio.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
He's talked about you, so
yeah.
yeah. No, it was that plot because he sent me an old interview you done, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, watch this," because Gavin, I think you did an interview years back. It was somebody, I don't know who the person was.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
losing, but you talked about how the woman you were seeing at the time from Tinder, I'd say, because you're like, I want to try to get in the games industry, and she was like, "Oh, my friend, like there's a games meetup like down in Brighton or something like that. Like you should go to that." And then,
Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because that was such an eye-opening moment. Because so I'm from a town on the south coast called Worthing, and my mum we moved to Brighton,
Mhm,
which is 10 miles east of Worthing, when I was 19. So that's when I started that college course. And so I've lived, I went to university, lived in London for a year, then came back. I've lived in Brighton for the last 15 years,
right,
apart from obviously I went up to Newcastle. But anyway, the point being,
mm,
I had no idea that there was this thriving games industry in Brighton. And the kind, because I went to industry workshops in 2017. Again, like my friend Matt, who was character artist at Creative Assembly,
mhm,
I met him through, because he was working on Warhammer Total War, and
right,
I met him through his wife, who was in a printing shop in Brighton, and I was getting some artwork printed, and she said to her husband, "Oh, this guy came into the thing today, and he does like Warhammer and stuff." And so basically, me and Matt started hanging out and playing things like Warhammer and Necromunda.
right,
And I kind of expressed my interest in getting into the industry. Um, and so he brought me along. He said, "Oh, he was speaking at Industry Workshops 2017. So he said, "Oh, I've got a spare ticket." So I went to this place, and that's actually where I met Giles for the first time.
nice,
And I saw all these people, and it was so overwhelming. All these amazing companies, and I was just, because this is in London, and I was
yeah,
like, I was like, I want to be here. Like, this is so cool. This is so much better than anything else I've kind of done. But I had no idea, and so I kind of I went back. This is again before I discovered the Brighton games industry.
yeah,
Um, so and then parallel to this, I kind of I think that's 2017. So then in March 2018,
mhm,
I ended up breaking up with a long term girlfriend.
mhm,
Um, and there's a whole other thing there about like having the courage to make changes in your life if things aren't working, yada yada
yeah,
yada. I'm a font of wisdom. And then obviously what you do when you break up with somebody is you try and take your mind off it by going on Tinder, don't you?
yeah,
Which again, not it's not obviously my finest decision, but it turned out quite well this time,
yeah,
because I met this nice lady and went on a few dates, and obviously I wasn't ready to be doing anything like that. So, but what did happen was we had this conversation. I was like, I went to this thing, and I want to get into games, and da 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 da. And she says, oh, just go and chat to. So her friend Pete was sharing a studio with Giles at the time.
Right.
Pete was an environment artist and Giles is a concept artist.
Pete Norris.
Um, I know his second name. It's not Norris.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just in case it was. Yeah, I know him as well. So yeah.
I just know him as Pete.
Yeah.
Um,
Good old Pete.
yeah. Um,
And then
and
she
so
talks about the meetup, right? She said there's the girls are saying there's a meetup in Brighton, basically.
yeah, this is sorry, I've dragged this story out.
No,
But
no.
basically, I went to the studio to because I was doing some freelance work at the time. It was
Mhm.
I was doing some freelance work for Rooster Teeth.
Oh yeah, the mech series thing. I remember you
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
yeah,
So I was like, oh, maybe if I get into a studio space with some other game people, then I can start like learning a bit more.
yeah.
And so I went to visit the studio, and Giles was there,
Hmm.
and I was kind of had the conversation with him. He goes, "There's a massive Brighton games industry. There's this meetup that we go to every month, and it's still happening now. Actually, it's kind
Yeah.
of died down a bit since COVID, but it's still pretty cool. And then yeah, I went to that on my own, in at the deep end. Had a couple of drinks to loosen myself up, and
That's courage.
um, you got it. And then
Hmm.
ended up just having. He's still a really good friend now, actually. A guy called Joe Sargent.
Right.
He was art director at Studio Gobo when they were working on Hogwarts Legacy,
Right.
and he's now started his own company in Brighton called Act Three.
Hmm.
So that's really exciting. But yeah, I ended up having a conversation with him just randomly because we're both kind of similar as very
Hmm.
kind of outgoing and you know cause trouble. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then he got me an interview with Electric Square 2 weeks later, and then that was my first studio job. And that
Nice.
that was the one where I was drawing cars. So
Yeah.
I had just the right thing in my portfolio. That's what they were looking for at the time, a racing
Right.
game. So it's very, very lucky series of events.
Yeah.
Because any one of those things didn't happen, like
Hmm.
if they were making a different game, or I didn't chat to that guy, or
Right. Yeah.
I didn't break up with my ex-girlfriend, none of that would have happened. I'm sure I would have got into the industry eventually, but I think it's a nice little story.
It's the thing of, like I said, you are where you're supposed to be. Like, you think about, like, oh, if this hadn't, well, it did, and and where you are now is the result
Mm,
of that. So you are where you're supposed to be, and it's a thing where, like, you know people get caught up in the, like, if I hadn't, like, I was the same. I went to industry workshops in 2016. That was my first
mm.
year, but it was the weirdest thing. Like, I was watching, for some reason, I was scouring Twitch to look for artists, and Anna Hollenrake, Anna Hollenrake.
I would probably recognize her.
She was an art director at Media Molecule, I
Yep.
think. The guys who do Fall Guys, yeah. Kind of, shortish, thin, blonde hair, short glasses. But, like, yeah, so she was painting on Twitch,
Hmm.
and she was doing just a painting she'd done. She's relaunched it as a print now, but she was painting away, and people were talking in chat, and I was saying about, because I think at the time also she was trying to get into games, or maybe had been freelancing something, but then chat was going around, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to industry workshops." In London in 2016. Should really check it out. And I was like, what the fuck's in the workshops? And then I looked it up, and then I was like, oh shit. And then I spent the little money I had at uni, like the money I saved up for my part time job and
Mm.
my uni money, and got a ticket and accommodation, stuff like that, and went down and met the guys
Yep.
in the workshops. And that's how I got to meet John Beeston and Jill from Axis. And they were like, oh, you're Scottish. Like, we've got a studio in Glasgow. I was like, I know, I'm going to Paisley doing 3D stuff. And they're like, oh, you should come up and visit the studio. That's how
Nice.
I got an internship. And then I met a bunch of people that, like, Marcin Kliski, Marek Maciej, the guys who done, like, the Witcher stuff from CD Projekt at the time, and a couple of guys from Creative Assembly. I met Giles, I met Titus Lunter, I met Alex Bedos, also Alex Heath, Daniel, like the guys who run industry workshops at the time as well, Gaff and that. So, like, yeah, I met, like, my first round of people there, essentially. And then from there, I just had to go every year. I went to THU, I went to Lightbox in 2019. Like, I've just kept trying to network and meet people. And like, yeah, so it's been a thing where,
It's really important.
yeah, yeah. Oh, getting out and meet people is, I mean, this is the thing. We are both, I think, essentially kind of extroverts. And when you're extroverted like that, you're kind of king of the nerds. Like, it's like, I found that people who kind of shy away in their corner can still get work. Like, totally, if you put an online portfolio and it's cracking, like, people will hire you.
Mm.
But you can get so many more cool opportunities by just like standing in front of people. Like, the amount of things I got to do by meeting Raf, like, apart from getting to work in his character workshop, but sitting at Lightbox, getting to work on his booth at Lightbox,
Yep.
and I was meeting people from Sony Santa Monica, from Riot Games and Blizzard and stuff like that. And then, like, knowing Lydia and stuff, getting to tour Riot Games and get to go to Blizzard and meet all the people like David Long and stuff that I'd met for years and years. And,
You've done more stuff than me. That sounds awesome.
I mean, like, it's been great. The difficulty. So here's the flip, right? I'm cracking at networking. It is my superpower. I can
Mm.
talk to people wherever, whenever. I can strike up a conversation, talk about anything. But getting the volume of work out has been the thing that I've not focused on the last couple of years. And that's where now I'm trying to make the switch in that I need to be doing more work and putting out more cool stuff to get those opportunities to meet together. Because I
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
networking. I know the people, like we've talked about this, where, I know people in studios at higher levels, but then if I'm not making the work, then it's hard to then convince them like to give me jobs, to give me opportunities. So it's a thing where now I'm trying to put my head down and do more work versus like going to meet people or going to events. Like I'm going to teach you this year, which should be really interesting because it's their 10-year anniversary. So there's rumors. Two names have been mentioned for speakers. One of them is Guillermo del Toro, and the other one is Hideo Kojima.
Yeah.
So if either one of those guys turning up, I'll be happy. But yeah, so that'll be a really cool event. But like, yeah, it is important to get out there and just meet people and talk to people and have that fear of like, I can't talk, I can't go out, and because it's, I mean, the amount of people I've met in this industry that are introverts that just don't want to talk to people.
I think that's the problem as well. I find it difficult saying that gives you like an advantage, because it's such a difficult thing to learn.
Yes.
Um, es- especially, uh, I was very shy when I was younger, and my 20s had anxiety and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously like a separate sort of
Yeah.
story. But the way that I became more confident and um, learned to talk to people and kind of feel like I had a bit more presence was. It sounds really silly, but it's when I feel like I know what I'm talking about. Like, so before I was an artist,
Mhm.
I was like, oh God, I look like an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. These people are going to think I'm an idiot. But now I've kind of proven myself. It's
Mhm.
sort of I feel like I'm much more comfortable talking to people.
Yeah.
But also I started going to the gym about 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
that just makes me personally feel a bit more confident talking to people.
100%. Yeah. Like it's not even a gym bro thing where like you feel like a kind of meathead, but like generally when your body looks and feels a bit better and your clothes fit a wee bit nicer, you just feel better about yourself. You have that confidence.
Mm,
Like obviously I've met so many people throughout the years, a lot of my friends used to be bodybuilders and like you see those guys going out who have had bodies like that for forever and they just have no fear. Absolutely
mm,
zero shit is given about certain situations because they just like power through stuff. But yeah, like it's, I mean, I think just in general, just looking after yourself, eating healthy and have a bit of knowledge, like, and just go into the world. And it's almost like exposure therapy. You can't just have to throw yourself out the front door and just try. Like, even just standing amongst people while they talk
mm,
will give you a bit more confidence than it did before. You don't have to talk, you don't have to chip in. If you just stand there and look like you're interested, like, that's enough. They've just been there in the room with people. But yeah, if you are a bit more forward speaking, if you can be a bit more confident, then yeah, people will notice you quicker. And then like you said, it gets you opportunities to go to work in places because people know you and they know about your personality because you talked about
mm,
it. So, um, but it's difficult because yeah, a lot of students I talk to are really shy. They can't. The thing that stuns me, Gavin, is that Control G, the industry server that I run on Discord, has something like 1,500 people on it, right? Which is like huge. Um, Maybe 3 or 4 people at a time are speaking. Like
right.
just everybody has this fear about if I talk, I'm going to be perceived and I'll probably say something stupid. Then the whole fucking 1,500 people will descend on me and call me an idiot. Like that is what people are thinking. And then you get people who are basically sitting like it's like a school dance. People are like standing at the side and nobody's wants to go in the middle because they're scared.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the thing of like there's so many people in that server that want to talk about stuff, but like you'll see somebody will sometimes bring up a really valid point and talk about something, and then it just explodes with people talking about something for like 5 minutes.
Perhaps perhaps this is a conversation. This is a separate conversation,
Mhm.
because I don't like making broad statements about culture and society. But I wonder if the age of the internet and social media, what's the word I'm looking for? Discretions
Mhm.
are so um, harshly punished that
Yes.
perhaps people are afraid of being perceived in a certain way or saying the wrong thing because it's kind of there forever. And then once you've, especially in an industry like ours where everybody knows everybody,
Yes.
I mean, God, I, I I even panic sometimes when you go to industry events and maybe you had one or two drinks too many.
You think you're going to say something stupid. Yeah.
And then it's like, oh God, hopefully I haven't upset anybody. I think I'm pretty good when I'm drunk. I'm pretty happy and
Oh, I'm the same.
chat to everybody. But it's that danger of, okay, you're now that guy. So and then you get that, and then that doesn't get forgotten.
I think people are genuinely a lot easier going than most people will think. I mean, there's people I know who have committed absolute fucking atrocities and have been welcomed back in the meetups and stuff. Like, and like I mean, it depends on the level. If it's something unforgivable, then fair enough. Like, you've kind of burnt your own fucking bridge there. Like, yeah. But generally, like, if you're generally just a nice person and respect people and their boundaries, then I think everybody gets along. Like, yeah, it's a totally fine thing. I don't think unless you say something like, horrific, like you've got a real far right opinion or something, then fair enough. Like, hey, because I've seen people like, but then the crazy thing about that is, there's a particular artist, I'll not name him, who has, his Instagram at one point was ridiculous, and he still is getting work, so like it's a thing where there will always be people who will agree with you and see the same way you see things, but it then might limit you from other opportunities. Fair enough, but like, yeah, I have seen people come, continue working or come back from working from doing stupid shit. But I mean, genuinely, like, everybody I speak to about you, Gavin, loves you, like, thinks you're a great person. So, like, I think you're doing fine. But like, yeah, I mean, like, I genuinely think it's like, yeah, as long as you're being, respectful and decent to people, like, you're always going to get along with people. It's, I genuinely think it's like, it is a small industry, but like, the only thing I would say that, like, is the negative I've experienced is that if you, and which is really stupid as well, because people have this thing about, like, I know I've heard that some people say to me about events about how I'm kind of the running joke of the industry in a sense that, like, I'm not putting out the work. I really, talk a big game, but I'm not doing a lot of like the work. But a lot of the stuff I've done in the last couple of years has been so far behind the NDA walls, I've never been able to talk about it. Like, I've worked in 2 AAA games that I've never been able to really talk about. But like, the thing is, people always have the perception of like how you're going to be. But again, as well, you can't please everybody. Like, you just have to get on with what you're doing and hope that like you're doing the best you can and be respectful to those around you. But like, people are always going to form opinions about you regardless of what you do. You could be the safest, kindest, nicest person in the world, and some idiot like is always going to make an opinion out of you that's totally fucking wrong. So it's like, because they don't know you and they don't want to know you, they just make an assumption from standing away from you. But
yeah,
industry events have always been like that, I think. And genuinely, if you're being just generally kind to people and respectful, then you'll get along fine with other people. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. But again, this is why now, you're doing what you're doing and you're making these big strides in the industry, and your personal project's kind of taking off because, you're just, like you said, you've got your head down, you're just focusing on your craft, making your thing. And then your jump racer thing, is that something where you're now going to continue making more stuff off the back of that? Or is that just kind of like, you've done that thing in Kickstarter, you're not going to do any more?
No, it's I'm working on 2 new models at the moment. Obviously it's just finding the time around everything else. There's not enough time in the day.
No, there's
And
not.
it unfortunately is something that's quite time consuming, making,
Yes.
you build a 3D model, but then you have to make it printable. So hollowing
Yes.
things out, making drainage holes, making sure that the scale of the parts isn't too small, because otherwise they'll snap off when they print out. So yeah, I mean, I've got a website that I've had built, and that's going to go live soon. So you'll be able to buy STLs and things like that.
Nice.
And then I'll do like limited runs of physical model kits that I'll put up there as well. It's been a really fun little side project, and I really find it rewarding. But there's not enough hours in the day,
No.
because I've got my day job. I want to do personal work. I want to keep sketching. I don't want to forget how to use Blender. And then I've got to do all the 3D printing stuff. I'm currently painting a model kit, my jump racer. I'm doing my version of it to put that up on the website on the product page. I'm doing that tonight, actually, as soon as I get home. That's also something that takes time. I'm in a new relationship with my lovely girlfriend, so obviously that takes up time as well.
Just life. It's just, there's so much going on. Yeah.
So it's she's very good. She's very supportive, and she doesn't. She always comes and helps. Do things when I'm working, which is really
she's
lovely.
Not an artist by chance, so she's not an artist as well, is she?
No, she's a singer. She was actually in a metal band.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. She's
Cool.
not currently in a band, but she's very, very talented.
Then it's good. So I've always found it's difficult. I think I would always find it to date other artists because we are so busy, right? It would be an almost weird relationship where you're both so busy you never see each other. Like,
Well, I'm
because
so I don't know about you, but as an artist, I'm also quite neurotic. So I don't think two neurotic people
yeah,
in the
it would
same
be
relationship is going to go
disaster.
very well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm lucky that my partner's a school teacher, so she has like the steady job. She has
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
decent income and a decent steady job, so that she's like she doesn't have to worry about like hunting for work or like thinking about where our next paycheck's coming from. Because like I would never shut on anybody. But then again, like I have said to her, like because she's like, you always seem so stressed, and I'm like, I know, but I love it. Like I can't explain it to you. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I know it's really fucking hard work, and you're constantly stressed. Like especially at this new studio, like because I'm doing so much stuff. But like I just I think I look back at like where I was 10 years ago and think like how far I've came since then,
Mm.
and think about, well, look what I'm doing now, like where I am. Like I never would have thought I'd be here. So like, why should I be upset that I'm here? Like even on the days when it is hard, like I remember how hard it was, like getting up at 6 in the morning and going out into the pissing rain for 6 hours to fix a phone. I mean, like that's talk about shit hard work. Like I mean, fuck, I mean, like dragging yourself halfway up a railway section, because you had to walk up the ballast like for like 3 or 4 miles to get to a point phone, and
Yeah.
like my god, like you just I mean it's just one of these things where on my hardest day, like I remember how hard it was then, and like I always think back to the day when I first done on call and I had to do 16 hours on a call out because a points system failed, somebody burnt up a bunch of cable, and we were out in the snow till like 4 in the morning. Like it's
Oh.
just never again. Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. When you think about that, then look at what I get to do now, which is essentially sit in front of this monitor and draw.
So the problem is, though, someone has to do that.
Yes.
So I suppose you just have to be really into it, or you have to be really tough, or you need something else that you're working for. I don't know.
I mean, it pays well. Yeah, I was saying it pays well enough that some people can block it out.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I don't mind admitting that I've got an artist temperament.
Hmm.
Obviously, I'm not like, sort of over the top emotional or whatever, but
Yeah.
when I say artist temperament, I mean I'm not cut out for those kinds of jobs. I'm just not tough enough. Um, but that's just me. If I wasn't an artist, I don't know what I would do, because it's the thing that's the most rewarding. It's kind of suits my sensibilities. But
You can always go to these stuff, and like I mean, like I've seen people like go to stuff like graphic design and product design, and like there's other things you could. There's always an artistic thing you could do. I think just the game industry is difficult because it is the most demanding. So yeah,
yeah, it's also for me the most rewarding.
yeah,
But I think that's what's so wonderful about having lots of different types of people, because all this different stuff needs doing.
Mhm.
And fortunately, we have people to
To do it.
fix phone points in the snow for 16 hours, because otherwise
Yeah,
nothing would work.
yeah. A lot of the guys I worked with are still there.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, because a lot of those, I mean, some of these jobs are like for life. Like you could live and die in those jobs. Like they're
Mm,
easily, you could work your whole life in doing one thing. But that just wasn't for me. I like the spice of life and the variety we get to do stuff, and
yeah.
do things. Every day is different because you're designing something new and interesting, and you never thought you get to design that thing. And I get to imagine. Like I mean, remember they were interviewing Tim Schafer back in the day, on, I think it was early days of like doing Broken Age, the
Mm,
whole thing we kickstarted that in 2013, and people were like, are you stressed about this new game? Are you stressed about this new game? And he's like, people don't understand what stress is. Like the stress is like looking at the bank account and being like, oh, there's no money in the
yeah.
bank
Yeah.
account because I have to fucking fire everybody every day and shut the studio. But like the idea of sitting, in my desk and being like, oh, remember this guy comes in and there's a spaceship and like that stuff is fucking easy. That's the stuff that isn't stressful. That's the fun part of the job. Because the same with us. Like everyone I talk to, it's like, yeah, accounting and doing your taxes and like figuring out like office locations and spaces and like logistical stuff, that's the nightmare. But like sitting drawing in your sketchbook is like vacation.
When when I start a new job, or when I'm looking for a new job, or when a job comes in, my only requirement is that they don't do crunch.
Right.
Everything else that happens within that day
Hmm.
is, sometimes you have down days where it's not happening, and you have
Hmm.
to kind of force yourself to be creative. Those don't happen very often, luckily. Sometimes you have really good days. Sometimes you don't get as much done as you'd like. But everything that happens within that 8 hours,
Hmm.
it's like brilliant, best job ever. I'll take it over any other job. I just don't know what else I would do. I just absolutely love it, and I'm still, because I've done other jobs before, because I've done jobs that I've hated. I've never done anything as hardcore as you,
Hmm.
but I still make sure to appreciate and not take for granted the position that I'm in, because it's incredibly fortunate.
Yeah.
And that's, it's not been easy,
No.
but
Yeah.
it's been
Fucking hard work.
very
Yeah.
rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. People think that like like obviously I've got people in my family who don't understand my job. And they're like, "Oh, you make pictures? That must be really fun." And I'm like, I mean, well, it is, but like, know that it's no work. Know that it's no turning up at like 9 o'clock in the morning and sitting down and having to make yourself do something. No, like unlike me, where like you were lifting and shifting and digging holes, like
Yeah.
fair enough. But at the same time, it's still a job. There's still days where you get up and you're like, I didn't want it. I've met people who are in this industry at the highest echelon of studio space, like guys like in Blizzard, who have turned up in the morning and been like, I didn't want to go in. Like I can't be fucked today. Like every single thing in the world, if you do it 365 days of the year, like it will eventually start
Yeah.
killing you. Like that's why balance, like you said, no crunch. Life outside of your work, doing personal projects. That's why it's essential. And why we talk about it so often, because like you have to retain some sense of sanity in your life.
Mm.
You can't do nothing but work forever. You'll fall over. Like so, just yeah, you've got to balance everything in your life, and I think that is the biggest thing, with this industry right now is that is trying to find the balance of like doing a job, but like not being utterly consumed by it that you can't do
Mm.
anything else. So
The one issue with artwork though, and I have done a lot of work to try and separate this out. Because obviously, especially at work, you get critique. Like, a lot of work that you do doesn't make it into the game. You have to change loads of stuff. Some stuff isn't very good, but it's that the fact that because artwork is an expression of you,
Mhm.
it becomes intrinsically linked with your sense of self. And
Yes.
and separating that out is so important, because otherwise
Oh,
you're
buddy.
just going to get broken down every single day. For me, that was a really important step to separate those two. And sometimes you know things are a little bit tricky, but
Mhm.
it's just that constant process of like, it's okay.
Try not to get you to have a meltdown in the toilets and think, oh god, I'm gonna get fired tomorrow.
Yeah,
No, no.
I just have to change the artwork. I'm not a terrible person.
Yeah, no, I heard about like it's like like I've watched some things where people have been like, it's not that it's like not right because it's wrong because you done it. It's just not
Mm,
right for the project, and the overall idea, especially when you work in a studio or for a game, like the end result is the game. So you can't be as personal as you want to be
yeah,
about like this was my artwork, this was my thing, my design. It had to be like this. Well, no, as long as it serves the project, that's the main thing that has to be really
yeah.
on top of the pile. That like when it goes out the door, it looks cohesive, and that's why an art director's job is an art director's job. Is that you have to look at everything your guys are handing in and be like, right, cool. Is this on point? Is this on style? Is this where it needs to be? And then you have to go back to people and be like, right, that's cool, but like it's no in the style guide, it's
Mm,
no in the art direction. You need to be a bit more. It was like I remember years ago. I always give this as a good example because it's such a great one that I got from one of the guys Eddie who worked on Sea of Thieves, where like their style guide essentially was there wasn't allowed to be straight lines in anything they drew. Everything had to be crooked. Because
yeah.
Sea of Thieves is like that. It's all squinty and stuff like that. So like stuff like that is something that you take on board, and you might draw something and be like, oh no, Rick, I really feel, but then they'll be like, no, it isn't in keeping with the universe, so we can't put it in the game
Mm.
basically because it's wrong. And that's where you have to get not so the ego has to leave the building basically.
Well, that's why I do personal work, because yeah, when I'm doing my job, it's I understand that it's not my money, it's the investors, it's the game director, it's their, I'm art directing at the moment, so
It's their vision
it's my creative vision, but um that is
in service to other people.
exactly. So the investors, as long as they're happy with the way it's going, if the game director's happy with the way things are going, it's taking everything into account. So it's not my money, it's not my product. So I'm kind of just doing a job. Whereas my personal work is like I want to do this. It's really weird, but I've just wanted to draw trucks recently. I've just been drawing all these trucks,
Oh, I think, yeah,
and
yeah,
and I don't know why. I haven't even coloured them. I just really want to do the line work and do the perspective,
yeah.
and it's just been really fun. But that's my creative expression.
Yeah, I think it's good when you work in big studios like that and you get the experience because then when you do your own stuff, you're like, all right, okay, I know how things would land or how it should be looking or like
Mm,
why this would. So it always just builds in, and I think that's why so many people eventually go into doing their own studios with their own games because you get so much experience for doing that thing that you then want to make your vision. Like when Stig Amundsen, who art directed or actually creative directed Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi
mm,
Survivor. So he came from obviously God of War, where he got an opportunity to direct God of War and then got an opportunity to go direct the Star Wars games. He's now formed his own studio, which I think is Giant Skull. But people were like, why would you leave Star Wars? Like, surely we're going to get to do another opportunity. And he was like, well, I got my opportunity to go do my own thing. So now I'm going to go do that. And I think
Mm,
that's always the idea, is that people always want to try and build to like doing their own thing because they have a vision as artists. Of course,
mm.
because it's in your head, right? So, I mean, Ian said that to me, Ian McCaig, years ago, where he was like, whatever's in your head when you die is gone and it's never coming out. So, like, you essentially have to get all of that stuff out
Mm.
as quick as you can because like when you're gone, like nobody will think like you, and nobody will make the things you'll make. So that jump racer thing you've made will live in the world forever now. But like, imagine a world where you hadn't made that thing, like, and that wasn't in the world, but now it is. So the more stuff you get onto paper and getting out into the world, the better, because the world is richer for it, and thank God. So
I don't feel particularly good if I'm not producing artwork, and I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing, because other people seem to be able to chill out and just like watch stuff and not worry. If I'm not producing, I get really
guilty.
twitchy. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's also positive because I really enjoy it. It's not like, and it also gets me jobs and things like that. So
It's got to, because when you're on the 20th hour of a project and it really is starting to like wane, then you have to have that idea in the back of your head that no, I love this. I want to keep going. I want to keep going.
mm,
Because that's what feeds into the stuff. And yeah, I mean, definitely not in the crunch culture. I just mean like if you're working a whole week on something,
yeah.
you're like, I'm getting fucking sick of looking at
I
this drawing. Like, yeah,
I've got what I like to call the 5+ project system, which is where, again, I like you said earlier, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but and I don't intend to, because it's not necessarily a negative thing.
yeah,
But I start one thing, and then I do a lot of work on it, and then I start another thing, 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 and then I go back round and finish the first thing. So
right,
there'll be periods of time where it looks like I'm really productive, and I post like 5 things in a month. That's just because I'm finishing those things one after the other.
yeah,
And so at now I'm going through the process of, there's a bunch of stuff that's unfinished, and I haven't got back round to it. So
right.
it looks
You've got
like
your
I'm not
special.
doing anything, but it's kind of happening in the background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a friend years ago give me a bit of advice with these dice with the D20s.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, just get a 5-sided or 6-sided D, make your 6 projects, and then every other hour roll it, and then
Mm,
whatever it rolls on, whatever number it lands on, you do that project
mm,
for 2 hours. And that's how he basically structures his day. When he has a spare day, he's like, right, what am I going to work on? He'll just like shimmy up and throw a dice, and he's like, right, cool, I'm working on that.
yeah.
Like for him, he likes it because it takes the decision away from him.
Hmm.
Doesn't have to really think about, I have 6 projects, I need to pick one. He's like, okay, well the dice will, that's fate will decide what I'm working on. But yeah, I think that's the way that like I've always been, is that you start one thing. I think that's why I've struggled the last couple of years as well, because I have this thing about starting one project and then being like, oh, I need to zero focus on this and get this done. Grind till I get it finished, and then I'll do the next thing. But yeah, like I just like the idea of sometimes like open Maya and just making the randomest fucking thing in 3D, and you're like, oh, I made something. Like it doesn't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be like a whole project. I just like having a couple of things I can go back to. So if I get bored of one thing, I can zero into the other thing.
I think that's why I've gone back to sketching recently.
Mhm.
So I used to do quite a lot of 3D. I've always loved sketching, but for me, sketching is so direct, and because I can just sketch, so I don't use blockouts anymore. I just sketch freehand in Photoshop,
Yeah.
and there's that's so rewarding, and it's so instant, and a sketch can be done in an hour,
Right.
and so I've got something to show
Yeah.
for that time. Whereas a lot of the paintings I do, you setting it up in 3D, and then you have to render it, and then you have to paint over it, and go away, come back, look at it again, get some feedback on it. I think, talking about time constraints, I think that's why I've just been sketching mostly recently, because you get that kind of finished project feeling
Mhm.
um, relatively quickly.
Without the huge investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that again, that's why I think personal work works, because sometimes you can do short form stuff versus like, if you're in a game for 4 years, I mean like fuck, like that's years of your life. Like you get to a point where you're like, I need to do something. I need to release something now. I need to do something that comes out into the world. I don't want to feel like
Mm.
and that's even some people, the trap they fall into, right? Where they will get in a game studio and they'll be in there for a couple of years finishing a project and they don't do anything but that project. So if it gets cancelled at the 11th hour, I mean, the worst thing I think was recently at Creative Assembly where they cancelled that Jackals game,
Yeah.
and like
Hyenas.
Hyenas, that was
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
yeah. And Hyenas Jackals, and that was a thing where like like my buddy Lars and stuff, like the guys who worked on that, who worked in it for years, who just will not get to show. I mean, Lars was different, where he had that space crew project he was making in the background, like the personal thing he was doing. So he was doing that on the side, and he released that a couple of months ago. It was really really good. But if he hadn't put that out, like he didn't have it in his portfolio for the last like 4 years or something, 3 years. So like, yeah, it's difficult
We
to.
just don't expect these things to happen. Who would have thought you'd have a game next to release and they'd just can it? And it's just like, oh, all
This
that
is the
work.
thing. Yeah, well, see, the problem with that was, and I can't speak. I don't have any internal knowledge, even though I have
No,
friends in that
neither
studio.
do I know.
Yeah, no internal knowledge about that studio or what was happening with it. But I would think that you'd look at the back end of running that online system constantly, because you make the game, but then the money comes where you have to create the server space to make that live online for years, and expand it as hundreds of thousands of people play your game. And then obviously DLC, constant drops with skins, like all that kind of stuff, which I'm assuming they had planned out in years in advance, but maybe they looked financially at like how much that was going to cost in the long
Yeah.
run, and then thought, how is that going to balance, with the game releasing? Because I can't remember if it was going to be free to play or it was going to be paid, but like, if I'm assuming it was going to be free to play, so your whole system is built off of skins and DLC stuff. So it's the same as well. Like, I'm actually stunned that, again, I have friends in that studio and don't know much about what's happening, but with Rocksteady, with Suicide Squad, from what I've seen for it so far, like the story especially.
I worked on that as well.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the cinematics and the story look incredible. Like they're extremely well done. The animations, the art direction, it's fucking amazing. But the idea when that was previewed, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, and it was going to be this shooter looter thing.
It's just not what people wanted.
No, I've looked at that because I'm like Rocksteady man. Like I have the art of Rocksteady in the back, and that book is worth a fortune now. Ashley's always talked about getting it signed at the studio, but I'm too scared to send it in the post. I don't want to get lost in the post. But like the Arkham series was, phenomenal. It's incredible. It was some of the best Batman games, best superhero games I've ever played in my life. I've been a gamer all my days. Those games were incredible. When Suicide Squad was announced, I was like, cool. It's no Batman, but it's a cool direction. Like I could see it working because the film, but like, yeah, it could be fun. And then the gameplay reveal came out, and I was kind of like, oh shit, like where was that idea? Who? But again, it's people tracing trends and
I was just going to loop back to our conversation earlier. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
chasing
trying to think
trends.
4 years in advance, like
Yeah.
Fortnite and stuff like that's came out, and like even that whole span of like Gotham Knights, where like that had came out, and like again, Warner Brothers had the system of like that was probably going to be online, it was probably going to be a pay per skin thing. That's why there was so many skins. But then at the last minute, they were like, no, we just need to make it a single player game because Avengers like has basically fucking came out and died.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's no point. And Suicide Squad, I thought for a longest time was just never going to get released. It was never going to come out. But I'm kind of glad it did, because at least then the people who worked in it can be like, well, it's finished. I can now maybe show like the character models I worked on and like the concept stuff I've done. But like with Hyenas, it was interesting to see how, like you said, on the 11th hour of that game coming out, it just died, just went to the graveyard, and is now never going to see the light of day, which is just.
Well, you got to remember as well. Again, I'm probably out of my depth here a little bit, but marketing budgets tend to be similar, if not more, than the cost of making the game. So
Yes.
you can the project, then you just don't have to spend on marketing.
Yes, essentially you can rep that money back. But yeah, I mean that investor group, fucking whatever they're called, the venture fund that was Embracer Group, yeah, them. Like, oh my god, man! Like, yeah, there's so many people that they backed that now have just like, yeah, been absolutely messed over. I mean, Riot and Blizzard's the same. The guys I know working in the studios that, when Riot canned like 10% of his staff as well. Like, even Blizzard, like the people I knew that moved their entire life across the world to go to California to work in that Warcraft Survivor game, whatever they were making at the time.
Yeah.
And then that's gone now. So it's like,
unfortunately, one of the risks of being in the industry, isn't it? And I get the sense that people, because obviously we had COVID and then everybody started working remotely, and I get the sense that people are returning back to working in house. So that we kind of thought that we'd done away with relocating to different countries and things to get the job that you want. But I suspect, my very limited knowledge, I can't speak for everybody, but it seems to me like that's coming back. People are having to relocate because I think companies are realizing that people just kind of work better when they're all in the room together. Is that fair to say, do you think?
I think it's difficult because when you look at the numbers, outside the games, like in the real world, like where people have office jobs and stuff, productivity actually went up. You know, it
Yeah, yeah.
skyrocketed. Also because a thing where people couldn't leave their desks. You know, they were staying later because they were in their house, so they didn't
Yeah.
have to commute. So they do an extra hour in the morning, an extra hour at night. But people are finding it's way more easy because, you know, like the thing like with Access Studios that was even weird to me at the time was, first of all, I worked in so many jobs where if you were 5 minutes late, people were tapping their fucking watches.
Yeah, I can't stand that.
Yeah. But also the fact that like people could come in, like they started at 10 o'clock in the day because people had a drop off schedule for their kids for school. So they were like, well, let people drop off their kids and come to work. And I was like, well, obviously that makes so much fucking sense. Like if you accommodate people, they're going to obviously do more work for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Like, people are always happier when you give a shit about them. So like the whole return to work thing for me is really interesting because I feel people were doing their best work remote. Like Alex Beddoes, for instance, you know, he worked on Jedi Survivor, but he worked from London. The studio's in LA, like, but
Yeah.
he done the work, you know. So like, I don't think there's any real need to be moving countries, unless if you want to go across and get that slice of life, you want to try and live in a different part of the world. Sure, that's a thing, and go for a couple of years and come back. I've seen people do it, like Nick and stuff like that, who worked on like Overwatch and worked for Blizzard for years, and then came back to the UK now to work. But you know, like, yeah, there's always an aspect of like you want to go and experience stuff, but yeah, it's also really interesting because like, yeah, you want to be accommodating to people, and I think accommodation is also one of these things where do you do your best work? Is it in an office or do you do it while you're sat at your desk in your house?
Perhaps it's about just having the option. I personally, so I'm working remotely,
Yes,
and
because you're in Brighton, so yeah,
yeah. I pay. You know, a few of us got together. There's four of us in here, and we got a separate studio space because I cannot work from home. I need that
same,
journey to work. I need that separation. I did 5 months of working from home last year when I first moved back to Brighton, and
right?
I was just getting out of my mind. It just made me so depressed. But I love that everybody kind of being in the same place, being able to feed off of each other. You know, I can kind of ask Giles, what, you know, get him to look at something. He gets me to look at his stuff. The guy over there, Ollie, he's a branding guy, so he did the logo. He used to work for Sony, so he did the branding for Last of Us and Killzone, and
Nice,
you know, he's really good. So he's done all my branding for the 3D printing company, and he's built my
nice.
website. So I wouldn't have had that connection if I was kind of sitting at home. So that's that. I think that's the thing I value. I value that that connection and that kind of
Yeah.
learning from
Which is
people.
totally fine. Like, I definitely think there should be a place for both people. I think if you want to be in a
Yeah,
studio
you should
and
have the option if you want.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't think people should back you into a corner and be like, you need to come into the office, which I think was recently where a lot of studios I heard where people were getting basically forced to come back in.
yeah,
People were just leaving because they were like, no,
yeah, yeah.
fuck that. I'm
Because
on
you get used to if that's the way you like to work, you get used to a certain way of working, and then you're told that you can't do it anymore.
yeah. I need people around me. I need a constant, thriving atmosphere of being able just to turn my chair and ask somebody something.
That's because that's like me. You're an extrovert.
Extrovert.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So but that's why I think I've suffered. I think that's why my art has suffered so much, and I'm struggling to really make strides in it, is because I'm stuck in Scotland in a room on my own. You know,
Mm.
and why I love going to these events because
Should
yeah, you
move
get
down
to
to
meet.
Brighton.
Yeah, oh fuck yeah, to England thing.
It's
So,
expensive, but it's good.
yeah, well, you're just south of London, so no fucking wonder it would be an absolute fucking riot to live in there. I'd imagine.
Well,
Yeah,
everybody over COVID decided that they don't want to live in London anymore, and they
moved
moved.
to
They moved
Brighton.
an hour south to the seaside, work remotely,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I'm in Edinburgh just now, so it's just as
oh,
fucking
I'm
expensive
coming
here.
up to Edinburgh on the 16th of August because my mum lives in Edinburgh, so
Oh,
I'm
nice.
up there frequently. Yeah,
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, well, if you're up, let me know.
I have to hang
We can
out.
grab a coffee. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
down for it. So,
nice.
yeah, okay. So, good place to stop. But like, yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah, it's been great talking to you, Gavin.
Yeah, yeah, that's been really good.
I think I'm obviously conscious of time. I want you to get home at one point, but like, yeah, I think we can always do a part two at one point, years down the line, or a year or two when you're back to whatever you're doing, or if you move somewhere else or whatever you're doing. But like, yeah, we can get on and talk about where your life is. But yeah, I think it's one of these things where you get talking about the industry. It's difficult when you're working. You try to not talk about it too much. When sometimes you have a good sit down with somebody and blather, it's just good to just, you know, it's infinite. Like you could talk forever on different subject matters and the industry and
Yeah,
events and stuff like that. So
I'm also very cautious to not. I don't want to generalize too much. You know, I have a certain view based on my experiences, but I could be totally wrong. So I'm always trying to be, you know,
cautious.
always trying to be open to maybe something things that I don't know, or maybe I've
No,
got
I mean
something wrong.
the opinion. People have this thing, like you said online, where it's like people have this thing. If you have this opinion right now in this interview, that's the opinion you hold forever, and it's not. People are constantly evolving. People, and even people I've seen in it early on who had opinions about AI and now have changed. I've said, look, I'd done it in the initial and I was wrong. This is what it. And then people are like, oh, we can't forgive him because he used it. And I'm like, no. Well, hold on a minute. Like the guy's clearly trying to turn a corner and learn from his mistake or learn from whatever he thought was the right thing at the time. But
So
like, yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've noticed, but on any of my social media, I never post any opinion. I never post anything political. There's the couple of times where I made a post about AI just to kind of gather my thoughts, but I never post anything like that online. One, because I, you can't control how somebody's going to read into that.
Yes.
And also, I don't want something that I think one day to change and then that's there forever, because I'm always talking to people and figuring out new stuff and coming to new conclusions, and my opinions do change. I just don't think it's helpful for me anyway. It's not helpful to have that recorded online,
No.
especially I don't in an industry where you know we, well, I mean, I'm not saying I've got any controversial opinions or anything, but I'm always very conscious of how I'm perceived, because I want, maybe that
I
goes
think,
back to the childhood thing. I want everybody to like me.
yeah, it's the people. I mean, again, it's a symptom of my ADHD anyway, but it's the people pleasing. It's the
Yeah.
idea you want everybody to like you, but it's difficult because like not everybody will like you, and I think you have to come to peace with that, because like sometimes people will get too caught up in like opinions, and I don't want to get, but like it's then I don't think. Also, to say this in a nice way, I don't think you're as famous as you think you are, Gavin. So it's nothing.
No.
I don't think too many people would, even if you did say something controversial, would really. But again, like I said, I know someone who was like way off the fucking radar, like saying absolute horseshit, batshit crazy stuff, and he is still working. So like, because the things he was saying resonated with people who were also art directors and higher ups, and they just kept giving them work because they were like, "Oh no, you're totally right in what you're saying." So like, yeah, it's a thing. You'll always find your audience, but like, yeah, I don't think you're ever going to go that far. But like, yeah, I don't think it's and I think also it's just a symptom of the world. The way, like you said, with social media, the last couple of years has been going. I think people are getting less and less. Like, even with Cara now, like people are like, great, and I hope it does well. But at the same time, like, I'm so burnt out in fucking social media. Do I need something else? Do I need another app or something else to do?
That
Like,
was
can I not?
that was my exact reaction to that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the necessity or somebody trying something new.
Yes.
I haven't got time to have another thing to post to.
Gavin, you would not believe this. There are people in jobs in this games industry that don't have any social
I
media
know,
at all.
I know.
How fucking bizarre that must be. Like, I mean, Rockstar North is down the road for me in Edinburgh, who work in GTA, and like half those guys don't have any socials. They have a
Yeah.
LinkedIn. They have nothing. They have no Facebook. They have no, and if they do, it's private because they get so much fucking email from people want to work in that studio.
It's so high profile, isn't it? Yeah. Well, luckily, nothing I do is particularly high profile, so I get left
Yeah,
alone, which is good.
I think it's one of these things as you move up in your career, that may be a thing you take on is like, I'm working at X studio now, so I maybe probably should rein in what I'm doing. But like you said, I think your stuff is clean enough. Like you said, you're not posting political stuff, you're not posting stuff about AI, so you're kind of trying to stay the middle ground.
I try not to get involved in politics because the whole thing just does my head in. I just want
I
to
try
draw my pictures and be left
I
alone.
know, I'm the same, but see when somebody sits on like Tyler's post and is like, AI is art, I'm like, oh, can't help myself but fucking like, I think the last comment I actually said to somebody was, "Are you fucking high?" Like it was like had this absolute fucking left wing opinion of like just like out of the box, like, oh yeah, AI, because because it takes real time and effort, and like we really are like the creative geniuses of the next 21st century. And I was like, are you fucking high? I just like, for some people, like I need to stop obviously because it's not a great thing to do, but I think just having seen my friends in the industry, because I have so many of them now in different corners, see how they've really suffered through all this shit. Like I got to a point where I was like, I'm just not even like kid gloves anymore. I'm saying to people like, you're so fucking batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you're thinking on what plane of existence you think you're actually right, but
Well,
yes.
I think if you have something to say and it's something that's important to you, then you should be allowed the space to say that.
Yes.
I'm a true believer in you say what needs to be said, otherwise you'll become resentful, and then you'll end up kind of negatively affecting your own life. And I think there's perhaps better forums to do that than the internet, but it's kind of it's if it's something like AI, that is the forum, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if people have a political opinion, even something say they're like, I'm actually thinking back in something like, another party that I don't agree with, I'll be like, right, well, cool, let's discuss it and see what you think. And I'm always up for a conversation. But if you start a conversation with AI art is going to replace everybody and it's the best form of art,
it's combative, isn't it?
Or the Earth is flat, straight away I'm like, well, you're wrong. Like, I know you maybe hold that opinion, but I don't think you're right in what you're saying. Like, it's like, people can have opinions, but when they're so out there, like, how do you hold a civil conversation with, like, especially when people start with something like flat Earth? Like, where do you start a conversation? Like, how do you approach that whole dynamic and try to rationalize their opinion to make you sound like you're coming from a better perspective? Like, it's so far out there that, like, where do you go from there? Like, how do you, if I could just tie you to a balloon and just let you float up into the earth and take a couple of pictures with your phone.
I've never met a flat earther, but I think it'd be quite a nice conversation. I would just want to hear what they thought and how they got to that conclusion.
Where they're coming from, like, how you have this. But it's that, I think it's also a niche of like feeling like you're a collective. Like, I think that's what AI has been like as well, where you feel like you're part of something bigger. Like, flat earthers sometimes will join other flat earthers because you're part of a group. You can go to conventions. You're part of bigger.
Human beings are tribalistic by nature, and unfortunately, the internet is tribalistic turbo.
It allows them to join
steroids.
Those people.
Yeah.
Like, if you're someone who likes, I don't know, ingesting people's left fingers, like, you'll probably there'll be a group online that facilitates that. So it's
that's
like
way too specific.
Yeah. Calling myself out here, but no, but like, I tried something to think it sounds so fucking batshit crazy, but it's like, even the whole like, like the people like say with flat earth stuff, it's the idea of belonging to something and seeing that you have a group that understands you and your perspective. So, but this is why I have a podcast, because people enjoy listening to me talk to people. So yeah, there's a cult following on this as well. Okay, Gavin, right. I'll let you go, buddy, because you need to get home to your painting session. But like, for guys who've got to this point, thanks for listening. It's a wee bit longer than we usually do, but it's been great talking to Gavin, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to him. I'll put all his links down below for all his stuff, his socials, and of course for anything for the Jump Racers related. You guys can check that out as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I will speak to you, Gavin, later, and I'll speak to you guys later. And until then, bye.
Nice one. Cheers, dude.